Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us on behalf of the community here at First Baptist Church of Bloomington. I'd like to welcome you. My name is Brian Hastings. I'm the senior pastor here, and we're in for a very special afternoon, and I'm very glad that you're able to join us. Thank you for those who are joining us online. We welcome your presence with us as well. This has been a bit of time in the making, and we're excited to be here as we get to experience this, not just as a curiosity of looking back into the past, but asking some questions. What is this saying to us now today? But I don't want to say too much more. In fact, I want to hand it over to Roger, who will introduce our person today. Yes.
Thank you, Brian. It is a great pleasure for me to introduce a woman of many, many talents, a woman that I've known for a good many years and who wears more hats than the one she has on now. Kathryn Harris, for many years, was the director of the library, was the Illinois State Historical Library, and it is now the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum. She also was the first African American, not only in that position, but the first African American to be president of the Abraham Lincoln Association, the premier organization in the country for the honoring. She just reminded me, as she is wont to do, she also was the first woman president of the Abraham Lincoln Association. But Kathryn, as I say, is a woman of many talents. She is also on the board of the Springfield and Central Illinois African American Museum, which just now is showing a Negro League baseball exhibit, which includes some people from Central Illinois who were a part of the Negro Leagues many years ago. Kathryn will take you back more than 100 years, and I think will make you realize the problems and the triumphs of African Americans as she represents the Moses of the Underground Railroad, and you'll understand why she was called Moses, Harriet Tubman.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Now that's more like it. I want to thank y'all for inviting me. I want to thank y'all for inviting me so I can tell you about the work that I've done on the railroad. Now, you may think it odd that I, a woman, worked on the railroad. But I did work on the railroad, the Underground Railroad, that is. Now, before I go any further, I have to tell you a little story. You see, a story has it that there was this slave and he was making his escape. Now, that's a mighty risky and dangerous thing for a slave to do, escape, or at least try to anyway. But nevertheless, the slave was being chased by a slave catcher. And the captain of the slave catchers come up to him and said, "Hey, Sam, what happened to that slave you was a-chasing?" And Sam said, "I don't rightly know, sir. He must have caught some underground road because he just plumb disappeared." Now, before I go any further, and so there won't be no confusion, I have to tell you something, and that is the Underground Railroad, why, it wasn't even underground. The Underground Railroad, why, it wasn't even a railroad in the true sense of the word. So if it wasn't underground, and it wasn't a railroad, then what, pray tell, was it? Well, I'm going to tell you that too. You see, what the railroad was, it was a connection. It was a network of people and places. Now, the folks who work on this railroad, they belong to a group called themselves abolitionists. Now, they was white abolitionists, they was colored abolitionists too. But you see, they all worked together for the same reason. You see, an abolitionist believed that slavery is wrong. An abolitionist believed that families ought not be separated. An abolitionist believed that babies ought not be ripped out their mother's arms and sold away, never to be seen again in life. An abolitionist believed that no man should own another. Now, I said the railroad was a network of people and places, and I've told you a little bit about the people, and some of them folks was Quakers. They also called themselves friends, and they are certainly friends to the escaping slaves. Now, the places on this railroad, and we call these places stations. Why, a station might be a cellar. It might be an attic. Might be the back of a wagon. Might be the forest, swamps, all outside. Because you see, what the railroad really was a way to freedom for the escaping slaves. Oh, I didn't tell you my name, did I? I didn't tell you my name, did I? Well, my name is Harriet Tubman. Folks call me Moses. Y'all know about Moses, don't you? Y'all know that Moses in the Bible led his folks from slavery to freedom. And since I, Harriet Tubman, have led my folks from slavery to freedom, folks call me Moses too. Now, I was born a slave. I was born in Dorchester County, Maryland. I was born in 1820. Of course, now it could have been 1821. Could have been 1822, might even been 1823, because you see, don't nobody care about no slave having no birthday. But I was born, because I'm standing here before you today. Now, on that plantation where I was born, there in Dorchester County, Maryland, was owned by a man whose name was Master Brodus. And on Master Brodus's plantation, I worked out in the timber. I worked with my papa out in the timber, and I got to be as strong as any man. But you see, I had heard about something called freedom, and I decided I wanted to have me some of that. So in 1849, I decided that I was going to be free. And I'm going to tell you, with the help of those kindly abolitionist folks, I got to my freedom. You see, those kindly abolitionist folks told me that when I got, not if I got, but when I got from Dorchester County, Maryland to Philadelphia, that I would be free. And I want y'all to know that with their help, I got to Philadelphia and I got to my freedom. And when I got there to Philadelphia, I looked at my hands, I looked at my feet. Same hands, same feet, except for one thing. They was free! And such a glory come over me was almost more than I could stand. Now, those kindly abolitionist folks told me that when I got there to Philadelphia, I should look for a man whose name was Mr. William Still. Now, Mr. William Still was a free colored man. He was not a slave. More important than that, Mr. William Still was the secretary to the Anti-Slavery Society right there in Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. But more important than all of that, Mr. Still was a conductor on the Underground Railroad. So like I said, I met up with Mr. Still, and Mr. Still taught me all about the workings of the Underground Railroad. You see, on that Underground Railroad, we mostly traveled at night. We hid in the day. At night, we'd follow that North Star. We'd follow the moss that grows on the north side of the trees, because you see, all roads that lead north, they lead to freedom. So like I said, I met up with Mr. Still, and Mr. Still decided that since I, Harriet Tubman, had made my own escape to freedom with the help of those kindly abolitionist folks that I told y'all about, he decided that since I'd done that, that I might be the kind of person who could be a conductor on his railroad. So I stayed there in Philadelphia for 2 years, got there in like 1849, and stayed there for 2 years, and while I was there, I hired myself out as a cook and a washerwoman. And with the money that I earned, I give it back to Mr. Still, because you see, it takes money to operate the Underground Railroad. So in 1851, Mr. Still decided that I might be ready to start being a conductor. So I'm going to tell you. On one of my very first trips as a conductor on the Underground Railroad, I went right back to Dorchester County, Maryland. I went right back to Master Brodus's plantation. This time I spirited away to freedom my brothers and their families, took them all the way up into Canada, where they could truly be free. Now, over time, I made about 13 trips on that railroad. I led scores of my people from slavery to freedom. Like I said, on that railroad, you know, we traveled at night and hid in the day and follow that North Star. About 13 trips, scores of folks. 1855 come on. That's when I was doing some of my best work. Those Maryland plantation owners, they had a bounty. They had a reward for my capture. They had them posters, wanted Harriet Tubman, dead or alive. That bounty money started off at about $12,000. But by the time 1855 come on, that money had grown all the way to $40,000. But you know what? Nobody never could claim it, because nobody never could catch me. And I'm going to tell you why. It's because I, Harriet Tubman, I never run my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger. All of those who traveled with me, they all got to freedom. But pretty soon, we start hearing about the rumbling of a war. That war come on in 1861. That'd be the Civil War, you know. But before I tell you about what I done in the war, I have to tell you about my last trip that I took as a conductor on the railroad. That was 1859, 1860, somewhere along in there. Told you about my brothers, their families, that I took up into Canada. Well, on my last trip as a conductor on the railroad, I went right back to Dorchester County, Maryland, right back to Master Brodus's plantation, except he'd passed on by the time that happened. He'd sold his property to a man whose name was Old Doc Thompson. I didn't shed ne'er a tear for Master Brodus's passing. But nevertheless, Old Doc Thompson, he had some property that meant a great deal to me. So on my last trip as a conductor on the railroad, I went right back to Dorchester County, Maryland. I went right back to Old Doc Thompson's plantation. This time, I spirited away to freedom my aging mama and my aging papa. Took them up into Canada where they could join with my brothers and their families and the whole family be free. Well, like I said, that war come on in 1861 and run all the way to 1865. And during that time, Father Abraham, he gave out that Emancipation Proclamation, and in it, give out that freedom to all those who had been slaves. Well, that sounded like a pretty good deal to me. But one thing that Father Abraham also said in that proclamation, it goes something like this: that if any escaping slave could make his way to any part of the Confederate States that was being occupied by the Union troops, then that slave could get his freedom too. So I want y'all to know that nigh on to 20,000 of my people served in the Union Army and the Union Navy because of what Father Abraham said. Also, in that war, I done my part too for the cause of freedom. During that war, I, Harriet Tubman, I served as a scout and a spy and a nurse in Mr. Lincoln's army. Never did get no fair pay for my service, but I done it anyhow because it was for the cause of freedom. Well, like I said, that war went on till 1865, and it come to a close. And so if you have that proclamation and you have that surrender there at Appomattox, and then you have the ratification of the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution, and if you mix all of that together, you have the end or the abolition of slavery right here in these United States. But even at the close of the war, there was still work to do for the cause of freedom. And I, Harriet Tubman, I done that work as well. Now, you're probably wondering, well, Miss Tubman, what'd you do at the close of the war? Well, you know I'm going to tell you what I done. At the close of the war, I worked in the Freedman's Bureau. Now, do y'all know what the Freedman's Bureau is? Some of you do and some of you don't, so I knew I'd have to tell you. The Freedman's Bureau, funny as it might sound, was set up by the federal government at the close of the war to help them former slaves learn how to be free. You see, what that Freedman's Bureau done was it taught them former slaves how to present themselves for work. They already knew how to work, having been a slave and all. They already knew how to work, but how to present themselves, get paid for the labors, keep the money for themselves, and be their own masters for a change. But I'm going to tell you, the best thing that Freedman's Bureau done was taught them former slaves how to read and write. Because in slavery days, against the law, teach a slave how to read and write. Well, like I said, at the close of the war, I went back up into Canada. Told you that's where I took my family. And I brung my mama and my papa and others across the falls. That be Niagara Falls. And I settled in a place called Auburn, New York. And that's where I live today. I live in Auburn, New York. And it is there that I take care of my aging mama and my aging papa. But I've also opened my home to other former slaves who's getting old and up in years and don't have no one to care for them. So the folks there in Auburn say that I operate a old folks' home in Auburn. And I reckon that I do. So now, I just mostly reflect. I think about the work that I done on the railroad. And I want y'all to know that working on the railroad was hard work, risky work, and dangerous work. But you know what? I'm mighty glad that I done it. Now, before I go today, I'm wondering if there might be any of you who might have a question you'd like to ask me, because I'd be mighty pleased to answer it for you. I don't want you to be shy. You can ask me anything that you want to ask me. Yes, now I'm going to need you to come up here and use that contraption there that will make your voice bigger and ask your question. And does he need to look at that little smiling face up there? I believe you're supposed to look at that too, maybe.
Okay. How did you communicate with the abolitionists while you were still a slave? How did you know where to go and all that, those kind of things?
Well, he asked a mighty good question. He wanted to know, how did I communicate with the other abolitionists? Now, is you an abolitionist? Okay, so you probably know somebody who's an abolitionist. That person probably knows somebody who's an abolitionist, and so forth and so on. And so, because there wasn't no sign that said, abolitionists come here. But what I do, though, when I would get my folks who wanted to be my passengers, those folks who wanted to ride with me on the Freedom Line, I would send word by one of my abolitionist friends that say, I'm going to be at such and such a place at such and such a time. And if you want to ride with me on the Freedom Line, then you be here. Now, only you know if you want to be free. However, I've never seen a slave that didn't have the desire to be free burning in his belly. But only you know. The only thing that I ask is that you have to do as I say. Because if you don't, mean trouble. I also want to tell you this. Y'all heard about John Brown? Y'all know who he is, don't you? The man with the fiery white hair and fiery eyes. He was a martyr for my people. Him and Father Abraham. They the two white men that done more for my people than any white man that I ever knowed. John Brown called me General Tubman because he said I was in charge. And I had to be in charge of my passengers on the railway. Because if they don't do as I say, they put all of us at risk of being caught. So, what did you ask me? I forgot. I kind of went on a lot of different places. But did I answer your question?
Well, I sort of have another question.
Well, wait a minute. Wait. Let's let somebody else ask a question before you ask another one.
Okay.
Who else has a question? Anybody else have a question? Yes, ma'am. You have to come on up here, too.
How many passengers did you usually have, and how many other conductors were there?
She asked a mighty good question. How many passengers did I usually have? I do not know the answer to that question. I had as many as wanted to go. Sometimes it was 2, sometimes it could have been 10, sometimes it could have been 20. It just depends on, like I said, who wanted to be free. How it's gonna look for me if there's a whole bunch wanting to be free and I say, you can go, but you can't go. You can go, but you can't go. So it just depends, ma'am. But you asked me something else. Can you just shout it out again, because I forgot?
How many other conductors?
Oh, how many other conductors was there on the railroad? I don't know the answer to that either. And I'm going to tell you why. The Underground Railroad was secret. The Underground Railroad was illegal. And so, like I said, there wasn't no signs that said, abolitionists work here and get on the Underground Railroad here. Especially for the slaves. Most of them couldn't read anyway, but so couldn't a lot of them other people. They couldn't read either. So the Underground Railroad was mostly by word of mouth. And you had to be very careful or very sure that if you was working on it and working with others, that they was of the same like mind as you. You see, does that kind of answer your question? No, I don't think nobody knows how many folks was conductors because it was illegal. I have a friend. His name is Thomas Garrett. Thomas Garrett lives in Wilmington, Delaware. And Thomas Garrett, he's a Quaker. And he's a cobbler. He made my shoes. But Thomas Garrett was a staunch abolitionist. Thomas Garrett gave safe harbor to more than 2,500 escaping slaves at his home in Wilmington, Delaware. Thomas Garrett had his property confiscated, thrown in jail, fined. He didn't care. It happened to him 3 times. He said he was going to keep on doing what he was doing because it was for the cause of freedom. So, me and Thomas Garrett, we got to be fast friends. And so when I come through Wilmington, Delaware, that's one place that I felt confident that my passengers and I would have safe harbor, might get a little food or some provisions or whatever we needed to continue on. Now, I did not always take all of my passengers all the way up into Canada. You see, I would pass them off to other folks who I knowed was conductors on the railroad. Does that answer your question, ma'am? Very good. Who else might have a question? And yes, are you making a sign like you have a question? Oh, okay.
I kind of have two. One is about
You
this.
can only ask one question at a time.
One is about this picture over here where you seem to be leaning on a rather large rifle.
Oh.
And the other was...
Let me answer that one first. I'm so glad that you noticed that, that image. I had my image captured for that. Actually, that is really a drawing that was in a book that was wrote about me. Now, do you know how to read, sir?
Say again?
Do you know how to read?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Well, come
ma'am.
on up here. I do not know how to read. I do not know how to write. But I do have a book wrote about me. Ain't that something? Come on up here, sir. Now, my mama, her name was Harriet Green Ross. She told me that I had a mind like a steel trap. You see, when I was a child, I was born Araminta Ross. They called me Minty for short. And I used to work with my papa trapping muskrats. And you know, they get caught in a steel trap. And so my mama told me I had a mind just like that.
Okay.
So even though I could neither read nor write, I have remembered all the words on this page. And if you mess up, I'll know. And you can also show them this picture. Because that picture over there is just a bigger picture than the one here. Now, what is the name of the book?
Scenes in the Life of Harriet Tubman
That's me.
by Sarah H. Bradford.
Now, do y'all know who Sarah H. Bradford is? I know you don't, so I know I'd have to tell you. Sarah H. Bradford is a kindly Quaker abolitionist woman, lived there in Auburn. And when I settled there in Auburn, after I'd done my work on the railroad and in the war and all that, she said, Harriet, folks might be interested in all the things that you done. She said, folks are interested in all the things that you done. And she said, why don't you put them in a book? I said, well, I can neither read nor write, so I can't put them in a book. So, friend, because she was a Quaker, I said, well, friend Sarah, she said she would put them in a book for me. And this is the book that she put them in. Go ahead on, there's more.
Auburn by
Auburn, that'd be Auburn, New York.
W.J. Moses printer,
Ain't that something? The printer have the same name as me, Moses.
1869.
1869, that's when that book was wrote. All about me. Okay, now, thank you very much.
And I also wondered, were you ever close to being caught?
Close don't count. But I will tell you, you can have your seat if you like. Be very careful now. Y'all can give him a round of applause. He wanted to know, did I ever get caught? And I said, close don't count. Did I ever come close? Well, I'll tell you about one close call that I had, and it goes back to my friend Thomas Garrett, who I was telling you about. My passengers and I, we'd stop there in Wilmington, Delaware, and stopped by there and saw my friend Thomas Garrett, and friend Garrett said, Harriet, one of my friends has some provisions for you and your passengers, but you have to go and get them. So I said, all right. So he told me how to get to where I needed to go. And so I got there and I got the provisions that they had, and turned out the provisions was live chickens on the foot. So, friend Garrett had he kind of tied them chickens up, with a rope, and I was just kind of leading them down the street, everything, and I passed by this, I guess you call it a store, and there was all these white folks sitting out there just talking. I had on a big hat, sun hat, kind of cover up part of my face there. And they was just chatting and talking, and I noticed a poster up there. Now, like I said, I can neither read nor write, but I do know what I look like. So I said, whatever am I gonna do? So, them chickens that I'd put in that sack that I had on my shoulder, they were still tied up by the necks in the bag. I let them chickens run out. Them men, they started laughing. Look at that little old colored woman chasing after them chickens. Little did they know that that little old colored woman chasing after that chicken was the same little old colored woman whose face was up on that poster. The moral of that story is, we didn't have no chicken for supper that night. We just kept on walking for the cause of freedom. That answer your question, sir? All right, then. Anybody? Yes, sir?
To your faith. How did you hold on to your faith when so many people that proclaimed to be Christians or followers of God were the ones who were oppressing you and your people?
That is a mighty fine question, sir. I held on to my faith because the good Lord called me to do this work. Talk to him every day. And I want you to know that where the good Lord leads you, he will not leave you. And he has never left me yet. So that'd be my answer to that question. That good enough for you, sir? All right, then. Who else might have a question for me? Well, way in the back there's a question.
I'd like to know how long an average trip took to freedom.
I'm going to tell you, all I can tell you is what I know and what I did. My trip from Dorchester County, Maryland, to Philadelphia was maybe a couple of 100 miles. Took me 3 or 4 months to do that, because on the railroad we mostly traveled by foot. Now, my trip all the way up into Canada, that was now on to 600 miles, and it'd take like 4 to 6 months. Along the way, we might have a kindly person who'll give us a ride, or on the back of a wagon, or if we got to cross a little stream or something, might help us get across. So it just kind of depend on where your trip start from. So, but I'm going to tell you, that Underground Railroad, Mr. Steele told me this, that Underground Railroad goes all the way from Canada, all the way down to a place called Florida and into the Caribbean. And them Seminole Indians there in Florida, they be part of the railroad too. sometimes. And it go all the way as far west to a place called Texas. So it covers a lot of territory. So, well, that answer your question? You have a question, ma'am?
When did you change your name and why from Minty Ross to Harriet Tubman?
Well, like I said, I was born Araminta Ross. I changed my name to Harriet when I took my freedom. You know what that means, to take your freedom? One foot in front of the other, and you just walk off. So I changed my name to Harriet to honor my mother. How'd I get to be Tubman? I was married to a man whose name was John Tubman. We got married up in 1847. We married up in the slave way. You know what that means, get married up in the slave way? Jumped the broom. Me and John Tubman, we jumped the broom. Now, John Tubman lived on the plantation next door. But John Tubman was a free man. But he stayed there on that plantation because I guess he didn't have nowhere else to go. But he hired himself out. And with some of the money that he earned, he had to give it back to his former master, for him staying there. Well, John Tubman took a liking to me, and we married up, 1847. But in 1849, when I decided that I was going to be free, I went over there and I said, because we didn't always live together, because Master was in charge of me. So I went over there and I said, John Tubman, do you want to be free with me on free soil? John Tubman said he was already free and he wasn't going nowhere. I said, well, I ain't free, so I left. But in 1851, when I started making my trips as a conductor, I went right back. And I thought, to Dorchester County, Maryland. I thought I'd look around to see if old John Tubman was still in the area. Well, he was. But John Tubman had took up with another woman. So that was all of me and John Tubman. But I don't want you to fret for me, because I'm working on husband number 2 right now. Husband number 2 goes by the name of Nelson Davis. And I know y'all never heard of him. So I'll tell you just a little bit about Nelson Davis. Nelson Davis was born a slave in the Deep South. That's what we call Mississippi, the Deep South. But Nelson Davis had also heard about that proclamation that Father Abraham had give out, where they said any escaping slave. I told y'all about that if y'all was paying attention. So Nelson Davis escaped from the Deep South of Mississippi, and he made his way all the way up to Beaufort, South Carolina. And in 1864, Beaufort was indeed being occupied by Union troops. And so Nelson Davis signed up to serve in the United States colored troops from South Carolina. Like I said earlier, Nelson and nigh on to 20,000 others of my people served in the Union Army and the Union Navy. Our freedom wasn't just given to us. We fought, bled, and died alongside them Union troops for our freedom. And my Nelson Davis done that. Now you're probably wondering, Nelson Davis at the close of the war, he took a liking to me too. And he followed me from the Freedman's Bureau, because he worked there too in the Freedman's Bureau. He followed me all the way to Auburn, New York. And this time, me and Nelson married up. We got married up in a church. We got married up in the Christian way. So me and Nelson, we've been married 4 or 5 years now. Now you're probably wondering, do I have any children? The answer's no. By the time me and Nelson married up, I was too old to have any babies. But my sister Susan, Lord knows I don't know what come of her, but along the way, I found my niece Gertie. And so I kind of raised Gertie as my own. Anybody else have? Did that answer your question? Oh, and another thing that Freedman's Bureau done was all of them jump the broom marriages. One of the things that Freedman's Bureau done was made them marriages legal and Christian way. That was one of the other things that was done by the Freedman's Bureau. Well, do we have one more question? Now, have you already just asked one? Anybody else have a question? Have you asked one, sir?
I have not.
All right, then you can go ahead.
What do you consider your greatest accomplishment?
What do I consider my greatest accomplishment? Well, I'm not one to be boastful, because the good Lord wants us to be humble, love mercy, walk humbly. Folks have said that perhaps my greatest accomplishment was the work that I done on the railroad. I am proud of it because it was for the cause of freedom. And if you have ever been deprived of your freedom, then you don't know what it's like not to have it. And that's what all them slaves. I done what I done. I had great respect for Father Abraham, but I done what I done because he wasn't working fast enough. Kind of give him a little boost along the way. Well, any other questions? If there are no more questions, then I only have this to say. You have been a very good audience. You have asked very good questions. And if you have enjoyed this, and if you have learned something, then you may applaud. Thank you very much.
Amen.
My friend Roger already told you a little bit about who I am and whatnot, but I'm gonna tell you something. This scarf, these clothes, it's pretty hot. And you see, I kept my gloves on the whole time. I learned something being a first-person presenter. Children have no compunction. They'll call you out in a minute. I was at a program for like kids in the 5th grade. By the way, that's who my monologue was written for, kids in the 5th grade. So y'all are all in the 5th grade. I was at her school. I was at the school one day, and the classroom there was no air conditioning in the school for one thing, and it was hot as blazes. I had on a wool coat, and I had on gloves, and I took them off. And this little girl said to me, You're not the real Harriet Tubman because you got red fingernail polish. That taught me a lesson. You have to stay in character the whole time, regardless of what the environmental details might be. So I used to take the fingernail polish off before I would go to a program. But then my fingernails got so weak. So now I just keep my gloves on. And I take them off when I'm done. I also keep my scarf on too, because there are some folks who have asked me about a scar that I had. And children will ask you about, let me see your scar. You know about it. I read it in a book. What book did you read? No, it wasn't a book that I showed you, but look, you have to just, the children, they will get you. And they like to try to get you too. So anyway, thank you so much. I do appreciate it.
It's been an honor. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Now, one of the things that comes next, I mean, as I was sitting and listening, I thought, wouldn't it be amazing to have the courage, the conviction of the abolitionists, of the conductors, of those who were so courageous. But that fight for freedom goes on. That fight to say, how do we care today for our sisters and our brothers? And so I'm going to invite Al Azinger to come on up just briefly and share a word or two about how we want to continue that conversation. But I want to say thank you so very much for coming today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation. I'm going to be here for a little while. I have some materials up here. You're welcome to come and look and chat with me, and if you care to. But once again, I thank you for your invitation. I am honored and humbled to have been invited today. Thank you.
I'm going to look at the smiley face at least until she gets by me. That's right. That's right. Again, thanks, Kathryn. This was great. I also want to thank Roger Bridges for helping us get this set up and get this all working. He's done the yeoman's work on doing this, and we appreciate that, Roger. We've got a small group here at church that's been meeting probably for close to a year now, maybe a little longer than a year, to sort of discuss some of the issues related to social justice and the intersection of social justice and our Christianity, what our role is, what it should be, what we need to do to fulfill that role as Christians as we try to deal with a troubled society. And we'd like to just extend an invitation if anybody is interested in joining our group. We're getting ready to start a new study session in November, not in November, this fall, and hope to sort of conclude by November on that. If you're interested, there are some sheets in the back that we'd like to ask you to fill out and put some time preferences on there, because we're trying to find a time that we can get the most people involved. If you sign up with that, I promise you we won't turn into used car salesmen and contact you and try to continue to bother you. It's just a chance for us to deal with something like that. Again, you don't have to be a member of our church if you're here as a visitor and are interested in that discussion group. There are no experts in the group. We're all just trying to learn. We've got a study guide that we're going to use this year that has been used in other places in the country pretty successfully. And so I would, again, just offer an invitation to that. People who are online, if you're interested, if you want to email the church and let us know of your interest as well on that. So that's kind of what I've got to say, I guess, on that. Again, I want to thank you. You did a great job. This was really fun. And thank you, Roger, and have a good afternoon and evening.